Yeah, today is about Memex and Storex as being an open and adaptive knowledge management system to overcome information overload. And so essentially what we're building is this online all-in-one tool to unchaos the online research. And in essence, the questions that we asked ourselves behind Memex and Storex is, if we want to create an open and adaptive knowledge management system, what does it need to do in order to be open and adaptive? Because if we're thinking about the tools that are available today, they're mostly locking ourselves into the tools we're using, and it's very, very hard to adapt them to our workflows because the economic interests behind the companies building those tools, they make us be inside those tools, and they make it hard to leave, create lock-ins, network effects, etc. And as first, I want to show you how Memex works as the base tool, and then later into how the infrastructure underneath works. You can download Memex at getmemex.com, but first I'll show you how it works. So auf dem Tisch, ich habe ein Telefonat noch. Wo hier an dem? And so where's that other screen gone? Here we go. So essentially what Memex does is, you may have run into this problem of having 100 open tabs that you never close because you don't want to lose the website, or have bookmarking folders all over the place that are hard to organize and hard to recover. And essentially you have to all put work into organizing your online research that you have to put in there, because you cannot search for knowledge that you've seen in the way your brain remembers it. And for example, if you think about a website like Wikipedia, if you see this website here, what you usually remember is a couple of words from the text, but that's not how you can find it again usually. With Memex, you can just search for every single word you've seen in that article, and across every article you've seen or bookmarked. You can search with M space, then type in electronic, and then you can also say, hey, I've seen this like 2 hours ago. And there you have that article again. And you maybe also have run into this problem, Joseph, where you take notes and copy paste stuff out of the articles that you've seen in order to not lose them. With Memex, what you can do is you can highlight any piece of text, add a note to it, and keep it. Good so far. What also Memex allows you to do is really flexibly organize everything you've seen. So you can, for example, organize things with tags, add it to collections, or bookmark it for later really quickly. Now, to come to the foundations of how Memex in the end becomes adaptive and open system is by changing two fundamental structures inside our organization. One is the company is not funded with VC money. And what that does is it changes the economic incentive structures towards not trying to lock people into our service. Instead, we use an economic model called steward ownership. And what steward ownership does is essentially capping investor returns and tying them to the profits that we're making as a company. And that creates incentive structures where we as a company are, we can lose users, we can create an open system, and we can have social responsibility by caring for our employees better, for our supply chain sustainability, because losing profits does not lower the total returns of investors. And the second component is the whole system is built on interoperability, meaning that you as a user have the freedom to move between providers. Memex is open source, so you can fork it, you can build alternatives, you can migrate your data over, and you're not locked in. But now the question is, probably some of you have, is how does that actually look in practice? So steward ownership, what I already said is like it solves the problems of having no lock-ins, having less exploitation or no exploitation, because there is the freedom to lose profits. And it reduces this need for growing at all costs with cheap services that then at the end lead to mostly one outcome, and that is a model that is based on exploitation of privacy. And so the first rule of steward ownership is the company can never be sold. So there's no exit. There's no value that people maximize for. And the second is the profit share, the investor returns is kept and tied to the profit, as already said. And what that essentially does, if you look at those two charts, is whereas on the left with VC money, you have more profit means more profit for the investors. In steward ownership, more profit for the company does not necessarily mean more profit for the investors. And so there is this area, this gray area, where this amount of money has the potential to be reinvested in for example, supply chain sustainability, in increasing workers' health and wealth, and generally creating more equitable structures inside the company. And in the end, the benefits for users is less lock-ins, cheap services, but that do not violate necessarily users' privacy, and increased social responsibility. And now to the technical level. On a technical level, how does interoperability look like in practice, and how do we make it different from other projects? For that, we built a software called storex, which is a kind of offline first and open source Zapier. And here we solve the problem that you sometimes run into, specifically if you use more fringe tools or not mainstream tools in your knowledge workflow, is that integrations between different services is often really dependent on the roadmap of the developers of the softwares that you use. And even though they might not want you to lock you in, they do it because they just cannot build everything. And so you have to wait for their roadmap to fulfill, for example, an integration between Memex and Pocket, or Evernote and Pocket. And so you end up continuously having frictions in your own workflows that don't allow you to move your data, that don't allow you to connect the workflows that you have. And with storex, how we solve that problem is essentially, it's an offline first application that runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac that allows developers to locally build integrations between different applications and do that outside of our control. And so, for example, this allows them to implement really like custom workflows of, hey, I want to analyze all the websites that I've saved with Memex, and I then want to analyze them, for example, for which of those are about COVID-19 and which of those are about antibody resistance, and then publish them to my Twitter account, and at the same time publish them please also to IPFS, which is a transport protocol and new technology that is very unlikely to end up in a mainstream product anytime soon. And all of the data that storex analyzes and hooks into is pulled back in your control and is stored there, so you can and later stages analyze it again without needing to call a cloud. And you continuously create more data ownership and more interoperability that is very user-centric, around you, and that allows you to iterate also faster with new tools. So if you have a new software that you want to try out, for example, a copy of Memex, you actually don't need to even migrate your data because it talks to the same data store in the end. Yeah, if you want to follow real-time updates, you can do that either on Twitter or on our Open Collective. And we have also a live update call every 6 weeks where we, have a short segment where we update on the current progress of the project, and also invite guests from developers, thought leaders, people who have really interesting perspectives on the areas in which we're working on. So this means information overload, misinformation, open source, alternative economic models, interoperability. And so, yeah, just jump in. Of course, the link to those calls is then in the Open Collective and Twitter. And also we're going to live stream them on YouTube while they're happening. And people can also jump in. Yeah, I think we have now a couple minutes left, like 5. If there's any questions, maybe people want to just write a chat message or jump into the video call. Yeah, I'm happy to stay for another 5 minutes and answer any questions that come up. No. Either way, it seems like there's no question so far. If you want to check out Memex, you can do that on getmemex.com, and all of the things that like I've been talking about, you also find in our documentation, on our GitHub repository, and on our Medium blog. So yeah, we're always there to answer any questions if you like in our forum or via the live chat. And hopefully we can welcome you soon as a user that wants to reduce his or her information overload by a little bit. Thank you all for listening, and sorry again that I was a bit late. Yeah, that was a fuck up from my side.